Breaking news, Trump today claiming Putin could offer a major concession toward a peace deal with Ukraine. Literally, that he says that this concession would be Putin not taking all of Ukraine.
Stopping, taking the whole country, pretty big concession.
Seriously. We are just hours away from Trump negotiator Steve Witkoff's latest meeting with Vladimir Putin. Witkoff, a real estate developer with no previous diplomatic experience, is traveling to Moscow. He is expected to meet with Putin. This would be the fourth time since early February. Witkoff recently said from his meetings with the Russian president that he isn't, quote, a bad guy. Last time he just returned to hand deliver Trump a gift from Putin, the portrait you see on your screen there of a bloodied Trump moments after that failed assassination attempt. Fred Pleitgen begins our coverage tonight. He is out front in Moscow.
It was one of the most brutal aerial blitzes since the start of the war. First responders frantically continue the search for possible survivors. Dozens confirmed killed or wounded, Kyiv says. I don't see strong pressure on Russia, nor new sanctions packages against the aggression of the Russian Federation, he said. President Trump reacting, saying he's not happy about the strikes.
I didn't like last night. I wasn't happy with it. And we're in the midst of talking peace, and missiles were fired. And I was not happy with it.
But Russian state TV in full breaking news mode, claiming the strikes targeted military infrastructure in locations across Ukraine. These videos show the unsuccessful attempts of Ukrainian air defense to shoot down Russian missiles, the anchor says. At the moment, there's no specific information about which objects in Kyiv were the target. The attacks come just hours before President Trump's special negotiator, Steve Witkoff, is expected back in Moscow for another possible meeting with Vladimir Putin. Witkoff recently telling Tucker Carlson he trusts Russia's leader.
What did you think of him? I liked him. Yep. I thought he was straight up with me. In the second visit that I had, it got personal. The President Putin had commissioned a beautiful portrait of President Trump from the leading Russian artist, and actually gave it to me and asked me to take it home to President Trump, which I brought home and delivered to him.
CNN recently got an exclusive look at that portrait from the Russian artist the Kremlin commissioned to paint it. He said he was told it could help improve U.S.-Russia relations as Moscow remains firmly in control of the pace of negotiations towards a possible ceasefire with Ukraine. The Kremlin saying they want a peace agreement, but on Russia's terms. We and President Putin are in favor of achieving peace while ensuring the interests of our country, the Kremlin spokesman says. This is a mandatory condition. And a senior senator in Moscow tells me Russia's leadership will not be pressured into a deal.
Trump has threatened massive sanctions if this doesn't work out.
Sanctions cannot change Russian national interests and our possibility to follow our interests. It is not possible.
And the Russians believe they have a good chance to get their way, both on the battlefield and at the negotiating table.
And Fred, at this point, what sort of outcome does Putin think he can get?
Well, first of all, Aaron, the Russians are saying they're not going to be rushed into any sort of agreement by the U.S. government. But there's two things that they keep talking about. One of them is, of course, the territorial concerns that they have. And there are some indications that the Russians don't only want to keep the territory that they currently occupy inside Ukraine, but possibly even larger areas than that. And the second big question that they keep talking about is their big red line, which is possible Ukrainian membership in NATO, which the Russians say is a non-starter for them. And there, on that question, Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, told Face the Nation in an interview just now that he believes that President Trump is the only U.S. president who truly understands Russia's position on that issue. But one of the things that we also have to keep in mind is that for Vladimir Putin, for the Russians, this is about something larger. It's not just about ending the war in Ukraine on terms favorable to the Russians, but also, of course, about a reset of U.S.-Russia relations and massive sanctions relief as well, Aaron.
All right. Thank you very much, Fred. And out front now, Vladimir Kara-Murza, and you know him well here on Out Front, one of Putin's fiercest critics, recently released from a Russian penal colony in a prisoner swap. He had been sentenced to 25 years for criticizing Putin's war in Ukraine. And Vladimir, I very much appreciate your time. You know, just on the whole NATO thing, I guess it's always important, you know, people who hear that argument, of course, there is NATO on Russian borders. Finland is a member of NATO, and that has been fine with Putin thus far. When we spoke a few weeks ago, you said top Trump officials were acting as propagandists for the Kremlin. And now today, you know, Trump came out and threatened Putin. And if he doesn't stop attacking Ukraine, he said, quote, things will happen. He posted Vladimir stop in all caps after the missile attack last night on Kyiv. Does any of that mean anything to Putin? Does he take it seriously in any way at this point?
Hello, Erin. Thank you so much for having me on your program. No, none of this means anything serious. And all we hear from President Trump towards the Kremlin are words, words, and words, and maybe an odd tweet now and then. But what we've seen the current U.S. administration do with Ukraine over the past 3 months have been shameful. I mean, everybody remembers the public showdown that Donald Trump gave Vladimir Zelensky in the White House. We all remember the so-called pause of U.S. military assistance, including intelligence sharing with Ukraine back in March, which led to hundreds of Ukrainian casualties, including among civilians. We all remember the U.S. vote at the United Nations General Assembly against Ukraine, siding not only with Putin's Russia, but also with North Korea, Belarus, Eritrea, and other similarly democratic countries against resolution condemning Putin's aggression against Ukraine. So frankly, I think the Kremlin must be running out of champagne by now, because they've been opening a new bottle ever since the 20th of January. What we've heard from the American president today, this quote with which you began your report today, I mean, I don't even know whether to laugh or cry anymore. Look, after these 3 months,
this is the pretty big concession you're talking about?
But, you know, when I was a kid in the Soviet Union, there was a Soviet joke when a tour guide was leading school children through a museum of Vladimir Lenin. And he said, kids, I'll tell you a story about the generosity and kindness of Comrade Lenin. You know, he was once shaving with a razor, and a little boy was passing by. He said, hello, Comrade Lenin. Comrade Lenin said, hello, little boy, go along, walk along on your route. This is how kind and generous Comrade Lenin was. And one of the school kids puts up his hand and says, what's so kind and generous about this? And the tour guide says, well, he had a razor, he could have stabbed him. This is exactly the same logic that we hear from the Oval Office today, and this is frankly mind-boggling. So the concession from the Kremlin dictator is that he's not going to take over all of the territory of another sovereign and independent country, just part of it. I mean, excuse me, we're living in the 21st century, not in the 17th. It is not okay to just go and grab another country's sovereign territory. And also, it has been a long-standing U.S. policy, regardless of which party has controlled the White House, for almost a century, that changes to national borders made by force are not recognized by the United States. This was a principle that underpinned the Stimson Doctrine back in 1932 after the Japanese occupation of Manchuria. And it was reaffirmed again in the Sumner Wells Declaration in June of 1940 after the Soviet Union occupied and illegally annexed the 3 Baltic countries, Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia. And for the entirety of the time when these Baltic states were forcibly incorporated into the Soviet Union, the U.S. State Department proudly flew their flags in the Hall of Flags on the ground floor. The United States never recognized this illegal annexation. And in these past few days, we have been hearing several media reports that the United States of America is actually considering officially, formally recognizing Russian sovereignty over Crimea, which was, of course, illegally occupied and illegally annexed 11 years ago. This is Vladimir Putin's Christmas wish list. He could not have got a better deal from the United States government. And that's why I say again that the Kremlin must be running out of champagne bottles by now.
Joining us now, CNN Global Affairs analyst and former special envoy under multiple presidents, Brett McGurk. Brett, so President Trump says that it is a big concession for Russia to stop trying to take the entire country and to stop the war. I'm no geopolitical expert, but that sounds to me like a bank robber goes into a bank, steals $1 million, is standing there, and a cop says, okay, you can leave, just stop robbing the bank, and you can take the $1 million. And that's a pretty big concession. I mean, it's not a great metaphor, but...
Hear your analogy that the bank robber actually didn't even get the money he wanted. Because remember that the Ukrainians have kind of imposed that concession because they stopped the initial objectives from Putin in 2022. He wanted to take the whole country.
Well, let's say the bank robber wanted to steal $100 million, but only had $1 million. I mean, they are talking about letting him have territory, the Trump administration.
Look, at the end of the day, there has to be a deal here that will deal with some swaps of land. I think that's probably going to happen.
Swaps?
At the end of
Not
the
just-
day.
not just
swaps,
taking?
I'm sorry. Some land. There's going to have to be land in this deal. Everybody knows that.
Okay.
The question is, when do you put all your cards on the table? And look, I think we all want this war to come. We want to get to a ceasefire.
Sure.
I was here last week. We reminded your viewers 5 weeks ago, Zelensky signed up to a ceasefire. Rubio had a statement saying it's now up to Russian reciprocity is the key to peace. Since then, there's been nothing but a Russian escalation. You know, Jake, I've negotiated with the Russians.
Right.
It's a classic tactic. Just before you're about to have a diplomatic engagement, they do something crazy. They do a missile
Like this?
strike.
Like
yeah,
this
they do a
attack?
missile strike. Yeah, they want to show that they are in control of events. Even though we might be a stronger power or a greater power, they want to show we are in control of events. That's what they're doing. And the fact that at least President Trump today said, hey, I'm sick of this, and there might be some consequences I have to impose. He talked 2 weeks ago about imposing secondary sanctions on purchasers of Russian oil. That would be meaningful. That would be impactful.